Hello again, everybody. This is the Catholic Esquire. Please check out my website at catholicesquire.org. I want to talk to you today about the concept of legalism. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and it's a very narrowly defined way of talking about legalism, I'm talking about it in the context of arguing over church issues, especially as we see on YouTube and social media. When I first started this video channel a couple months ago, I wasn't sure where it's going to go. I wanted to offer something that other people don't necessarily offer in these types of podcasts. And I'm not a professional theologian. I don't claim to be. I do think I know the catechism pretty well. I know the faith, what it teaches, the real faith. And I'm also familiar with the modernists and how they operate. And so my skill set is primarily as a legal analyst. I'm an attorney by trade, a litigator. I've served in a judicial capacity as an arbitrator and mediator. And so I have experience with analyzing legal questions and documents. What's always driven me crazy about these debates on social media on Catholic topics is that it turns into these legalistic, nitpicking, document nitpicking debates. It drives me absolutely insane because this is not how the church is supposed to work. The church's teachings are not supposed to be legal documents that are picked apart by whoever wants to make a case for whatever they want to achieve in their personal lives. But that's what it's turned into. There is a reason for that. It's because the church has been infected with modernism, yes. That's the religious heresy of modernism. But modernism itself comes from and stems from the wider error or sin of liberalism. Liberalism affects our society, our civil society as well, outside of the church. And part of liberalism, and this is true for the United States of America, part of liberalism is that it's a constant conflict, a battle between people. It's a tug of war to see who, at the end of the day, gets to assert their power over others. That's really what modern politics is. It's a matter of 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 constant battle in order to achieve a political victory. And a political victory means causing another person to submit to your will. That's what modern liberalism is. Well, my friends, this is a totally foreign concept to real Catholicism. Unfortunately, because of this mindset, where now we have legislatures and administrative agencies that promulgate thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of codes and regulations and commandments and everything else, it's become this the legal system in this country has just become to the point of almost being unmanageable. But this thought process of drafting up documents and commanding people to do something or telling what other people to do, like you would in a statute or administrative regulation, has filtered into the church. And so now when people argue and debate over what the church teaches, they're always going back to some church document and trying to nitpick it and pick it apart and dissect sentences in order to prove their case over who's right and what the church really says. You guys, this is a totally foreign concept to how tradition and real Catholicism work. It's also pretty foreign to how Western Christendom worked, especially all the way up until we get to the Enlightenment era, where this notion of written constitutions and statutory law comes into play. Whereas before, we had a common law, and society and culture developed very organically over many centuries. And in some ways, it's very similar to how sacred tradition works. It's not a matter of imposing one's willpower over the other. But what I wanted to do today for you is do a little exercise to show you how this modernist legal nitpicking works. And so what I'm going to do is use an example in Sacrosanctum Concilium, just one little provision in there, so you can see how this process works and how those who they don't call themselves legalists, but they really are, try to attempt to manipulate and dissect documents in order to prove a point. Let's look at an example and then we'll talk some more about that. Okay, now we have the Sacrosanctum Concilium document, Vatican II document from 1963. This is on the sacred liturgy. Okay, this is a document frequently referred to by both traditionalists and liberals to support their positions on the Mass. I want to call your attention. Let's start with paragraph 4 of the Sacrosanctum Concilium document. I'll read the whole paragraph, but we're going to focus on the second sentence. And then I'll give you a little exercise just to show you how this works. It says, lastly, in faithful obedience to tradition, the Sacred Council declares the Holy Mother Church holds all lawfully acknowledged rights to be of equal right and dignity, and she wishes to preserve them in the future and to foster them in every way. Now, here's the sentence I want to focus on. The Council also desires that, where necessary, the rites be revised carefully in the light of sound tradition, and that they be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. Let's take a hypothetical example, okay? Let's take the example of perhaps an Indian tribe in the Amazonian jungle. And they are new and interested in Catholicism, but this tribe wants to preserve certain traditions they have, which includes certain Indian prayers, that includes certain types of dress for the priests who's celebrating the Mass. And perhaps they want to allow women to take certain roles in the Mass. Okay? Now, if let's pretend I am first the liberal Catholic. I'm going to argue that, well, if you look at paragraph 4 here, the second sentence, it supports the Amazonian Indian right to change their Mass to conform to their needs, their circumstances. Because if you read this sentence, it very clearly says there at the end uh, that the rites be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. So, yes, it does say it must be done in light of sound tradition, but then it says, and they be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. And so this sentence here allows or permits the Amazonian Indian tribe to change their rite to conform with their own culture. Now, let's pretend I'm the conservative Catholic. And I look at this and I say, well, yes, it does say in the end of that sentence there that the right be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. But as you mentioned, the portion of the sentence right before uh, the segment you referred to says the rights they must be revised carefully in the light of sound tradition. Okay, so the rights be revised carefully in light of sound tradition, comma, and they may be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. But you see, it has to be in light of sound tradition. So while the Amazonian tribe may be able to add in certain cultural elements to the Mass, they're not able to change the parts that would be out of line or in conflict with sound tradition. So perhaps they can change some things, but they can't change everything. Now, the legalist traditionalist comes along. He looks at the same sentence and he says, no, no, Mr. Liberal, no, no, Mr. Conservative, you are missing the entire point of the sentence. Read it again. The council also desires that, where necessary, the rights be revised carefully in light of sound tradition and that they be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. You see that where necessary condition applies to the rest of that sentence. And so you first have to demonstrate a necessity. And so, Mr. Liberal, you cannot change any portion of the rite of the Mass in your circumstance because it is not necessary to do so. It's just a preference that the Amazonian Indian tribe wants to do. You need to demonstrate necessity. And then, of course, the liberal will come back and say, aha, but it is necessary. It is necessary because they have a particular circumstance in their particular region. And it, as the end of this sentence says, the rights may be revised to meet these circumstances, and those circumstances are the necessity, and that is why it's allowable. You see, the argumentation can just go on and on and on like this, and we're all talking about the same sentence. Now, a person with common sense who's not a legalist would come up and look at this sentence and just say, well, it says the council also desires that where necessary, the rights be revised carefully in light of sound tradition and that they be given new vigor to meet the circumstances and needs of modern times. Huh. Well, what happens if there's a need to meet circumstances of modern times, but it's not in light of sound tradition? How does this sentence tell us what to do? Well, of course, the answer is it doesn't, because this sentence in this document is ambiguous. We get no guidance from this at all. And that's how a person with common sense who doesn't look at church documents in a legalistic way would look at this. The most you can conclude is it's ambiguous. And of course, that's part of the problem with most of the Vatican II documents. They contain so many little sentences and provisions like this that it allows anyone and anybody to cling on to certain sentences or even parts of one sentence, like in this case, in order to support their positions on what should happen with such an important thing like the sacrifice of the Holy Mass. Do you see how poisonous this modernism is? Okay, so you can see how this one little sentence can be picked apart and dissected segment by segment in order to achieve a predetermined outcome. And that's really what the legalist does. They have a concept, they want to impose it on somebody else, a goal essentially. And then they go and they look at whatever particular rule or church document they want to use to, and then they find a way to make that document, what it says, fit into their predetermined narrative. And that's how I look at, or how I define these modern YouTube pseudo theologians that try to defend modernism. That's what they do. You can do it with all sorts of examples. You can do it with women's ordination. You know, it's a little hard to do because so many of the documents absolutely exclude it, but you know what? They're going to try. But especially with the Mass, as we just saw, there's so many different ways you can argue using this Sacrosanctum Concilium document to achieve whatever outcome or change you want in the sacrifice of the Holy Mass. So what I'm hoping to do, again, with this channel is sort of leverage my expertise on these sorts of things to help you as a good, solid traditionalist understand when you're getting buffaloed by people either on YouTube or in person, or sadly even a priest perhaps at a Novus Ordo Mass who tries to tell you certain things and tries to use certain church documents in order to support something that's a complete novelty. It's important that you understand how this works and why it's completely foreign to the notion of Catholicism. Um, if this is useful to you, I would uh, request that you please share the video and like the video and subscribe to the channel. I do hope it helps. And if you think this is useful and you want to see more dissection of documents like that, so you can see all the ambiguities, especially within the Vatican II documents, it's actually quite easy to do because there's so many of them. Please let me know in the comments to this video. It would be most appreciated. Thank you very much and have a great day.